5.5 FM, the most influential name in radio. The most influential name in radio.
This Sunday on episode 7 of Eye on Dependency, where every life is a biography.
As Trinidad and Tobago debates the introduction of a public registry of sex offenders, how much will it help keep people safe? And how much could it harm? This Sunday, Garth and Natasha speak with two women whose families have been negatively impacted by registries. We welcome a former Marine, mother, and advocate.
No one should be on a public registry. I'm Amber. I'm a survivor of sexual assault and the spouse of someone who is required to register. And this is my story.
We will also hear from the moderator of an online offenders' wife community.
I'm Nancy. I've been married to my husband for 30 years, and for the last 7 years, he's been forced to register on Iowa's Public Sex Offense Registry. This is my story.
Have you considered the impact of public registries on the lives of those registered? Tune in this Sunday from 10 a.m. to find out. Listen live on I-95.5 FM or watch live on the Eye on Dependency Facebook page or YouTube channel. Eye on Dependency. We don't just share stories. We change lives. We change lives.
Eye on Dependency with Garth and Natasha.
Reality radio at its best, where every life is a biography.
Sundays at 10 a.m. and exclusively on I-95.5 FM.
And streamed live on the Eye on Dependency Facebook page and YouTube channel.
Good morning, and welcome to Eye on Dependency. I'm Natasha.
Hi, good morning, Garth, and thank you very much for joining us. We thank Guy Barrington for holding it down from 6 till this time, and here we are now with a very important program for you all this morning. What a better time to have a program like this on none other than World Radio Day.
Yes.
So we go international with radio this morning. Give you time to settle in, and listen to this very important program this morning, because this is something that will affect us sooner or later, or touch us sooner or later in our lives, and you all need to know about it. It's a discussion right now in our parliament and with the sex offenders registry and the act, and there's another side of the fence that we want to introduce you all to. And at the end of this program, will give us a lot of food for thought. We, of course, on Dependency, continue to bring the lessons to educate not only the ordinary man, but our lawmakers as well. And
we hope they're tuned in as well.
Yes, and this particular issue, I mean, we've never had a chance to sit with the Attorney General, but I remember hearing him saying one thing about the sex offenders registry. And what he said is that people are clamoring for it, but he hopes that you all understand the domino effect and what comes with it. So, contacted by Mr. William Dobbs, he's an attorney in New York City. He got wind of the program, and let me just share with you what he said. And while Shortman hook up with our first guest via video, we'll be speaking with Nancy. And but Mr. Dobbs said, "Hello, Garth and Natasha. I noticed that your next show will be about the registry. That's great. And thank you in advance for engaging this difficult and important issue. I'm an attorney in New York City. Below is a recent issue of my sex offense law and policy newsletter, the Dobbs Wire, about the 2009 death of a man listed on the registry. And he decided to pass on, and this obtains too in ironically in the world of drug use. Instead of crack addict or piper, it's recovering addict or recovering person. So there's some language
Or person with a drug use disorder.
or person with a drug use disorder. So there's some language that he's suggesting. So and I think it fit that we start with that. And he said, please use the phrase sex offender as little as possible. And let me say that again. Please use the phrase sex offender as little as possible, because that phrase is so destructive and stigmatizing. As with other criminal justice issues, use people first language. Example, and he gave some examples. Person with a past sex offense or registrant, registered individual, was like that, etc. Likewise, the phrase sex offender registry also spreads stigma. Instead, he asks that the language be changed to sex offense registry. Is an easy substitute. I know it will take some time for us to get our, the chips change in our head and minds about this. But again, this is Mr. Dubb's suggestion. The phrase public sex offender registry is confusing. Please try not to use it. If you're talking about the registry, sex offense registry is all you need. The word public creates confusion. Some people who call for an end to the public sex offender registry only want to stop registry websites. I want an end, that Mr. Dobbs want an end to the registry, and that's how I say it. Or if somebody really wants an end to the website, make it plain. End sex offense registry websites. By the way, in the US, the registry is a database. The website is a form of community notification. There are other types of community notification. In some areas, and listen to this, put a sign on the front lawn of a registrant. Embezzled sex offender on the driver's license. They send press releases to the media about the registrant or send letters to the neighbors. This is a very serious thing, people. And again, as I said, we, as in the past, especially at the start of the pandemic, when we were locked down for a very long period, our police unit arrested and charged a lot of people for sexual offenses with minors, and especially sometimes even in their own home with their daughter, niece, uncles, friends.
And as we know, as documented evidence suggests, that most sexual offenses happen with persons who are known to the victim or the survivor.
So, introducing our first guest this morning. After we take this break, we'll come back with Nancy. Nancy, just to give you a brief, her husband right now is on the registry, and Nancy will tell you how he got there and what were the experiences. Now, this is what we're focusing on this morning. Yeah. You have a member of your family on the sex offenders registry, and this could be mother, father, brother, sister. She will tell how it affects the entire family. Maybe we can learn something from that. But get ready on World Radio Day.
And a day before Valentine's.
For a ride, first time on national radio.
Yep.
After this break, we'll be back with Nancy. Stay right there.
Happy talk to you now, boy. Got a small work for you to do. Make a quick 10 G's. We're going to do for me. 10 G's? What's that? How am I do this, boy? What do you mean? Taking your boat, run up the islands, pick up some people, and then bring them back here for me. That's all you have to do.
That's sounding like human trafficking, man. That's a serious crime. I can't make that.
Trafficking in human beings is a serious violation of a person's human rights. It violates a person's right to freedom of movement, freedom of choice, freedom of speech, and freedom of identity. It is a heinous crime which affects local, regional, and international peace and security. A victim of human trafficking is subjected to many types of abuse. The crime destroys a person's dignity and self-worth. Victims often feel hopeless, are suicidal, and are stigmatized in their communities. Child victims are deprived of their rights to education, play, and social interactions. They're essentially robbed of their childhood, and that can never be regained once those years have passed. If we do little or nothing to fight against human trafficking in our country, we can face economic sanctions from international agencies and partners. Our country will be losing money. Doing little or nothing to fight against human trafficking will tarnish our country's international image and, most of all, the value we place on human life. Human trafficking is no respecter of persons. Anyone can be a victim. So let us all strive to safeguard human life and dignity in Trinidad and Tobago.
We are the Counter-Trafficking Unit of the Ministry of National Security, Trinidad and Tobago, safeguarding human life.
Finally, Welcome Relief comes in the form of a scientific-based program that shows us how to manage through the tough, current challenges. Called Habitalism. It features best-selling author on positivity and happiness, Dr. Tal Ben-Shahar, integrated with the award-winning Intangents methodology of Ross. Visit habitalism.me to register now for this free life-transforming program endorsed by the United Nations established University for Peace. Gifted by Guardian Group. Live easy.
Ion Dependency with Garth and Natasha.
Reality radio, at its best, where every life is a biography.
Sundays at 10 a.m. and exclusively on I-95.5 FM.
And streamed live on the Ion Dependency Facebook page and YouTube channel.
Welcome back, and thanks for staying with us on Ion Dependency. We are getting ready to hook up with our first guest, Nancy Miller. But before we do, we wanted to share a piece of audio with you from an interview that she did on a podcast called Amplified Voices, which is actually hosted by our second guest this morning, Amber Blangas. And this is where Nancy describes the immediate after effects of her home being burst into by police officers and her husband being, and on all of their computers being confiscated, etc. He wasn't arrested at that particular time, but this is just a snapshot of what took place after the police officers left Nancy and her husband.
What now? We're stunned. I'm like, what do we do with ourselves now?
So there's no arrest. You're just kind of left completely traumatized.
Yeah, no guidance. They're just like, well, we'll get back to you. No, here's the number to the local crisis center. But my husband said, I'm so glad they came.
Wow.
He said, I've been wanting to stop doing that for a long time, and I didn't know how. He said, every Sunday I go to church and I think, I'm not going to do that. Not going to do that. Not going to look at porn anymore. And then by Sunday night, he'd be back up. He goes, I didn't know who to ask for help. And that showed me there that he was ready to stop. And he knew the error of his ways. So I went and got the phone book, and I got a beer at noon on a Tuesday. I said, I'm going to have a beer and you're going to find somebody to talk to. So he found a psychologist and he made an appointment. I had to talk to somebody, so I talked to a couple of friends and just tried to process the whole thing. And of course, they're in shock. they don't know what to say. They've never had this happen to anybody they knew. So yeah, it was strange. I also called my doctor, made an appointment with her and told her what was going on. And I said, I'm not going to be able to sleep. I need something to shut my head off at night, or I'm just going to ruminate. So she did give me a prescription for something that would help me calm down at night. I was on that for 4 years.
Right, so that was Nancy. Let me see somebody already post a question here. Beirut,
A comment
here. All right, so let me get this out of the way. One time we have Nancy via video right now waiting to get onto the program. So if I get in this right, if you commit a sexual offense and tried by the courts and found guilty, you're telling me that you could make demands to be protected and the victims out in the rain. Well, that is not what we say in Beirut, and that is why I'm glad you joined us. And I want you to listen carefully to the suggestions that will be made. We're not saying to slap anybody on the wrist or to forget about the victim, and that's not what this program is about this morning. So please just listen. Nancy, good morning and welcome. Nancy's out there in Connecticut. It's
Iowa.
Is 9:30 in
It's 8:17. Where you are, Nancy? Are you hearing us?
Yes, that's correct.
Right.
Right.
So it's just after 8. How is Iowa? How cold is Iowa this morning?
Oh, it's probably around 0.
Oh.
0. Okay. Fun time. So stay inside and stay warm. And thank you for spending your Sunday morning with us this early. And you are about to help us understand certain things. After we'll be speaking with Amber, and then we'll have both of you up. Maybe we may have some questions to answer, stuff like that. So, Nancy, without further ado, tell us about your life before your husband was arrested.
My husband, at that time, my husband and I had been married for 20 years. We own our own home in the small town that we grew up in. Can you hear me?
Yes,
loud and clear.
Yep.
Okay. See, we own our own small business, and we had 3 kids that were about 8 and 9 and 1. And we were busy family. I was a stay-at-home mom, so I took care of our kids and took care of our bookkeeping for our business, and my husband did the work for our business. We own a small janitorial business, so he goes in after hours and cleans places, offices and things. And we were just having our coffee in the morning when the police came. And you heard what happened.
Immediately after.
Yeah.
But could you tell us what he was arrested and charged for, and what was some of the immediate impacts on your life and your family's lives?
Well, our federal Department of Homeland Security raided our house, and that was very traumatic for me, for us. It was a big surprise, and let's see, and that was a big ordeal, and they took our computers, like I said in that clip, and they came back about 6 months later to arrest my husband. They had found 13 images of child sex abuse. So this is another, Garth, I heard you talking about changing the language, and we used to refer to that as child pornography, but we don't say that anymore because children are not they're not voluntarily participating in that kind of activity. It is a recording of a child sex abuse. So
Right.
We just want to acknowledge the victims that are in these images. So 13 images can show up on one screen at a time. And there can be thumbnail images. You might click on them or not, but they're in the cache of your computer. So not to make excuses or anything, but I just want people to know how easy it is to be in possession of those type of things.
No, Nancy, can I just interject here a minute?
Yes.
No, there are hundreds of millions of people who own computers. And of course, there are some who will say that they've been on their computer all their lives, like I have been. And I have really never come across child sexual abuse or abuse of a child on the internet. But as it obtains in your neck of the woods, once these images are downloaded or clicked on, it is picked up by your law enforcement. Is that it?
Well, not all the time. So my husband was caught. I mean, very rarely does that happen. But my husband was caught because some police, like investigators in Italy, had found a website a year before they came to our house. They found the website that contained child sex abuse images. They commandeered that website, these Italian police, and they ran that website for 2 weeks and collected the IP addresses of everybody who visited that website.
Good.
Oh, okay.
Good.
So that's how he got caught. And then, so once they get your IP address, then they start making out warrants and send them to various agencies across the world. It's a worldwide problem. And then they just sit in the prosecutor's office and they go through the court process of getting search warrants. They have to have a grand jury to make sure that they're doing it right. And so that's what happened to get them to our house. My husband had looked at 13 images on that website, or 12, sorry, and a year before. He had been looking at pornography since he was probably 12. And then once the internet came out, he had started using the internet to look at pornography almost every day.
Nancy, hold on.
Yes.
If you're just joining us, folks, you're listening to Dependency. And it's a topic for Sunday morning they didn't expect, but it has to be said. It has to be, we have to have this conversation. And remember, Trinidad and Tobago has the record of the most downloaded porn in the, I don't know how we ended up with that, just like the fast food, but we were mentioned as one of the countries that downloaded a lot of porn on computers here in Trinidad and Tobago. Likewise, there are a number of men and women and children who access porn on their computers. So I hope you're listening this morning and understand that if our cybercrime unit takes it a step further and up their game in a certain way, you can have police knocking on your door and you wouldn't even know your husband or son or daughter or wife been downloading porn on their computer or looking at it. Nancy, go ahead. Thank you very much for that.
Yeah. So, I mean, adult pornography is perfectly legal in the United States. I'm assuming it is there. But once you get into images of child sex abuse, then that's when things get to be against the law, which it should be.
Yeah.
So my husband got arrested. He was taken down to the federal courthouse and booked and given a hearing. Then they sent him home on pretrial release, which they don't always do. But he had to wear an ankle monitor until then he got to come home, and he wasn't allowed to be around any anybody else's children. He could still be around our children, but he had to be home at a certain time, and we had to have the probation officer come by and check and make sure everything was okay here. So that happened until he changed his plea and took a guilty plea, and then he was taken into custody. Eventually, he got a 30-month sentence. That's 30 months in federal prison. We were able to get our business lined up so that we had enough help to get us through his incarceration. When you're in the United States, it's probably like this all over the world. If you've done any crime against a child, you're lowest of the low.
Yeah.
Pardon me?
Lowest of the low. You know?
Lowest of the low. Your life is in danger when you're in prison for that, unless you're in prison with a bunch of other people who've done the same thing.
Yeah.
But my husband did not get sent to a facility like that. He was in with a lot of people who had drug crimes and, gosh, I don't know what else they've.
No, but
mostly
Nancy,
drug crimes.
no, there are people who would be listening to you and say, okay, so then why are you still calling him your husband? Did you confront him with this? Did he, confess that he has a problem, or this was by accident? What was that conversation like?
Yeah, absolutely. He confessed that he had a problem. In that clip that you played, Garth, he said, he wanted to get help, but it's so stigmatized here to ask for help for any sexual issue that there's just really no place to go. And he didn't know what to do. He didn't know how to handle it.
So he was finally happy when he was arrested then, so to speak. I mean, I know the feeling when I was arrested for my offense. I just stuck my hands out and let the handcuffs go on, because by that time I was tired running around as a crack addict. So was he happy when finally he was arrested?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really kind of a similar thing in that the addictiveness of pornography, there's a controversy on whether it's an actual addiction or not, or if it's just a behavioral issue. So, that's an argument for a different day, but that compulsion to always have to look at pornography and to soothe yourself with sexual activity. I mean, who doesn't know somebody who does that, So that's what he was facing, and he hated himself for it.
Is the reason why he took a plea deal because he or yourself wasn't willing to go through the process of a trial, or was that too onerous, too expensive? Why did he take a plea deal?
Well, first of all, there are at least 3 charges probably 4 or 5 charges you can get with possession of child sex abuse images. You can get a production charge, and a distribution, and receipt, and possession. Of course, to possess it, you have to receive it.
Yeah.
And receipt carries a 5-year mandatory minimum here for our federal system. So usually people are charged with possession and receipt. Possession does not have a mandatory minimum. So what the courts will do is drop that receipt charge and give you a possession charge. This is what they used to do. That was like 10 years ago but now they're really doing that mandatory minimum and charging people with receipt. My husband, like I said, they found 13 images. Some of those images were duplicate images. Some of them they could tell that he never clicked on. So it was just showed up on a scattering of a screenshot. So they said if, the evidence is right there. If by the time the federal system gets a hold of your case, you're nailed. They don't take stuff to court or bring charges against people that they don't have enough evidence to find guilty.
Right.
So he was told by the public defender, if you take this to court and try to deny that it was your fault or claim that it was your fault, then a jury would come back with a really harsh sentence. And he was guilty. He knew he was guilty. So he pled guilty and chose to get his sentence from the judge. And that's who gave him the 30 months. 30 months.
30 months.
Right.
And were you at any point during this process, from the time the police came into your house to the time he was sentenced, were you aware that his name and address and photo would be listed on a registry?
Well, yeah, he was told the day they raided our house that what he could probably look forward to. The arresting agent told him he would probably be incarcerated for 4 years, because at the time that's what people were getting was 4 years. And then he said, you're going to be on the sex offense registry after that.
So what, if you're just joining us, folks, you're listening to Dependency, and speaking with us via video is Nancy Miller out there in Iowa. And this is our first guest. She's our first guest this morning to go over this topic. And Nancy just taking us through the first process of her husband getting arrested. Remember, you can join us live on our Dependency Facebook page or YouTube channel, or listen to us on 95.5 FM as you normally do, to be part of this conversation. Because, as I said, Trinidad and Tobago is not exempt from people who are sex offenders, who access porn. And again, the language, I have to get accustomed to the new language that is suggested, and rightly so. Why not?
Yeah, and one of the things that we want to discuss with Nancy and later with Amber is how his offense and being on the registry has impacted their lives. So
yes, that's where we're going to go next.
Speak to some of that.
So when he was arrested, of course, the neighbors. So you all were home. Was this in the morning or in the evening when the police raided? What was that experience like first?
It was about 9:30 in the morning, and we live on a busy street, on a busy corner in a small town, and we know everyone in our town. So when the federal police came, there were probably a couple different agencies involved, but there were 6 police vehicles sitting in the street and people coming in and out of our house. And our town police chief came, and he knew us. We've been friends with him for 20 years. And he was shocked to be at our house. He didn't know what was happening. The feds just called him in as a courtesy to say, we're going to be in your town, meet us here and follow us to the scene. And they landed at our house, and he said, I can't believe I'm here. So it was shocking. The police came in our front door and our back door after pounding on the door and scaring us. And they had Kevlar vests on, and they had their weapons. I didn't see anybody with their weapon out, but they definitely had their hands on their weapons as if we were dangerous. And it was just super scary. My heart starts racing now when I'm talking about it. Our boys were at school, our older 2 children, and then my daughter was here, and she was just a toddler then. So she wasn't it wasn't that frightening to her. She didn't really understand what was happening. So,
and this is
but
after never having any kind of interaction with law enforcement like this.
never. I mean, we were very law-abiding citizens. We went to church every Sunday, very involved in our church. I mean, we were at church all the time. A lot of our friends, our support system was from church. Not to say that Christians can't also be criminals, because they sure can. Obviously, that happened here. And so we just thought we were living a good life. I had no clue. I kind of thought my husband was looking at pornography, adult pornography. I didn't even realize that child sex abuse images were a thing on the internet. I had no idea. So it was quite shocking to, after an hour and a half of them searching our home, they finally told me what was going on. And they had been talking to my husband in another room. And he confessed to what he'd been doing. And he said he felt horrible for it. And then they told me, and I was just shocked. It didn't fit my husband's character at all. He had never been a person who sought out children. I would sign us up for things at church, like to volunteer in the nursery for a Sunday, and he would find a way to get out of it because he didn't want to be around other people's kids. We have a joke that sometimes we can barely stand our own, right?
Well,
didn't want to be around somebody else's kids. So it wasn't like he was seeking out opportunities for children.
Yeah.
Well, probably Nancy, you probably think that probably he knew what was going on inside of him too, and he probably tried to avoid being in contact with other people's children. Did he ever confess that?
That's one theory, but I know him, and I just know that he doesn't have a thing for kids. It's hard to wrap your head around, maybe, but.
And you have never, and your children have never come to you and speak about anything that you've been doing with them inappropriately at any time.
Right. And we talk about that. We're very open about, making sure that those lines of communications are open. Ironically, later, many years later, my daughter did come to me about a girl that she had groomed my daughter and had done inappropriate things. My daughter was a friend of ours.
Wow.
But my kids all know, my husband doesn't wrestle with the kids. He doesn't put hands on them or anything. But here we have this little girl that I used to babysit, and she's the one that ended up touching my daughter inappropriately. So
Nancy, all right, so he's arrested, he's sent to prison for 30 months. So now the small town knows about this. Tell us that part first. How did you all fare when how did it happen? You went to court and you just came back without him that day?
Yeah. I took him to court. He changed his plea to guilty and agreed to a plea deal. And then that's when they took him into custody and kept him at the county jail until he could have a sentencing hearing. They had to do a pretrial investigation and find out, what are his criminogenic needs? What kind of character does he have? So in the meantime, I asked all of our friends if they would write a letter of character for him, for the judge, so that he could understand what kind of person he was. Our families kind of, for the most part, scattered. weren't extremely supportive, but didn't abandon us completely, but not, nobody wants to be involved in this. So people just kind of keep at an arm's length distance. And Some of our friends were very understanding. Some of our friends couldn't understand it. Our church family was very supportive at the time because we were very transparent about what was going on. You know, they wanted it to be a learning experience for people and not just hide what happened, but we didn't want this to happen to anyone else. So we've always kind of worn it as a warning of this could happen to you too.
Right. So he's alive and well, and he's still with you. Some people will say you're crazy, but
For staying with
for
him.
staying with him, you know, you want to let's go into how now it started to affect your family. What was the domino effect now? He's in prison. He comes out. What happened after that?
When he got home, when he was released from the actual prison he was in, he had to go to a halfway house for about 3 months, and then his Bureau of Prison sentence ran out. So he'd served his time. He was out. He was sentenced to 5 years of supervised release. So basically probation. And he had a lot of restrictions that he couldn't, until he started his treatment program. He couldn't be around our kids or any other kids at all.
So how did you all work that out?
For me, well, he went and lived with some friends of ours who live out in the country.
Right.
They were kind enough to take him in there, but then they had to put their address on the sex offense registry because he had to go to the sheriff's office and fill out the paperwork and let him know where he was living. So now our friends become part of this scheme too. And he lived there for a couple of months until he went to the treatment, started in the treatment program, and they did a lot of testing on him. They did a psychosexual exam. They did a test that measures who he is attracted to. It's called an ABLE test. And that's pretty accurate. They can tell if you're really attracted to children or if you're attracted to males or females or even what race of person you're attracted to. And his test results showed that he was attracted to adult women. And as most men are, they might not want to admit it, but most men are attracted to teenage girls that are developed and have curves and are filled out in the chest. And that's what he is attracted to. He showed no attraction to children in the testing at all. The thing about pornography is it's there. And once you're getting on these different websites, you find all kinds of things to look at. There's bestiality and rape, porn, all kinds of things. So just because somebody looks at a certain type of porn a few times doesn't mean they're necessarily attracted to children.
Or going to act on it in real life.
Right.
Right. So there's
different study about that too. And
right. So Nancy, so out there in Iowa, tell us now about the stringent measures and what he's not allowed to do now as a registered person.
Right now, he's off that supervision. We applied even early for him to get off of that because he complied with all the rules for 4.5 years, and the judge did let him go from that because that was very oppressive to live under those rules because he wasn't allowed to be around our children at all when he was alone with them. I mean, he wasn't allowed to be alone with them. So I always had to be in the room, in the house, but now he's off that restriction. Okay. So these are just our sex offense registry laws. Let's see, where do I start?
Yes,
First of all,
take us through that whole journey. What you know, what do we expect once we set up ours here? You know, what obtains out there in your neck of the woods? Let's hear
okay,
it.
so every state has their own codes. In Iowa, he can be at a park as long as he has a purpose to be there. He couldn't just go to a park and relax and sit by the water. That would be considered loitering. So he's not allowed to go to a park and loiter.
He still has
He's
to
not
wear an
allowed-
ankle monitor.
What?
He still has to wear an ankle monitor.
No, he
Okay.
does not. No.
Okay, go ahead.
He is not allowed to go on the property at our children's school unless he has written permission to be there. He can pick one of our children up from school or drop them off, but then he has to leave immediately unless he has permission. So if, like, next week, our daughter has school conferences where we go in and talk to the teacher. And he and I have always done that together. And so now he has to send in a form to the principal and get permission to go to the school with me and be with me the whole time. And that can be very stigmatizing. We've had some of our school principals put really strict, he can only be in certain, this one area, and he has to be escorted through the school. And, it's very embarrassing. He's not there to pick up children. He's just there to go to his daughter's school conference. Some schools here don't even allow that. They have that option. They don't have to allow for people on the registry to attend their children's activities. And that can be really devastating for kids too.
Of course, because they don't understand why their parent cannot, engage with them and the world as he or she used to. And
Yeah.
of course, other children can be very mean to their peers. And, people will be talking about them, teachers will be talking about them, and they will also carry the stain of their parents.
Yeah. I always took the approach where I would just tell their teachers because I expected their teachers to protect them from the bullying that might happen.
Yeah.
And I wanted their teachers to be aware that this was an issue in our life. And I asked them specifically to help my kids get through this. And as far as I know, they honestly didn't suffer. Every once in a while, there'd be a kid that would say something. But my kids are pretty tough and they know how to just blow it off. And they've fared pretty well.
Before we take another break and bring on Amber, you told us off air about an incident that happened with your church, and I just want you to tell that story in the sense of explaining how the stigma and the kind of irrational fear that people have can impact on the life of someone who is registered.
Yeah, and their whole family.
Yes.
Like I said, we were very involved in our church. We helped out a lot, and we were always very honest about what was going on with our life. And people really appreciated that. So when my husband got out of prison, he came back to work for our company doing janitorial work. And one of our jobs was to clean our church. And while he was incarcerated, I did that job. And I loved it. It felt great to be able to do something for my church and for my church family. And that's the way he felt about it too. So he came back to work for us, and he was there for several months, and nobody ever complained about him cleaning the church until they decided to contract and rent part of the space to a preschool. And then all of a sudden we got called into the church office by our pastor and the preschool board president, who we considered friends, you know, and they knew us, and they said, we want to talk to you about the cleaning. They said, you know, we don't think that Chris would ever do anything wrong in the building, but somebody else is worried that he might. So we're here to present this. They put it as an offer, a compromise that our company could still clean the building, but he would not be allowed to clean the building.
Even when there are no children in the building, this is after hours when nobody's there.
There was nobody there. In fact, in those months when he was cleaning it, nobody said anything. If somebody dropped by the church to do a chore and had their children with them, he would leave. He didn't want to be accused of anything.
Right.
He didn't, he didn't want to make anybody uncomfortable. So he would leave and come back when those people were gone. So for a year, we wrestled with this issue. At first, we agreed to the setup so our one employee that we have would clean the church, and my husband would go clean another church, by the way, who didn't mind. They didn't care if he was on the registry or not. They still don't. It's not an issue for them.
No, Nancy, how long is he on the registry? Will be on the registry for? What's the law in?
It was 10 years. For his offense, it was 10 years.
10 years. So he's still on there.
Yes.
Right. And
8 years left, I think.
right. And during that time.
Oh, I'm sorry. He had about 2 years left. He's been on for about 8 years. Yeah.
Right. So, and then what about electronic devices and going at a school and mall and stuff like that? What are these other issues?
He can go to the mall, but he shouldn't be around the children. Here we have children's play area there. He could probably get in trouble for being too close to those and hanging around, which he wouldn't do. He can go, he can be in the park as long as he has a purpose to be in the park. He can't go to the library. Our government funded libraries, he's not allowed to go there without permission from the librarian. He's never asked to go. It would be too embarrassing to have to ask. So
is his computer, any of the computers in your home monitored as well? No, I would imagine.
No, not at all.
No. That is odd, because his offense was directly related to the internet, was it not?
Right? It makes no sense.
No.
But he was monitored when he was on supervision, when he had to have a probation officer. It was monitored then. And he wasn't even supposed to be on it unless he had a specific purpose to look something up or do business on it. But now there's no monitoring on his computer. He has to register any of his screen names. Like, he's not on social media, but if he was, he would have to report that to the sheriff, what his username is. He has to report his email address to the sheriff.
Okay.
He has to register our vehicles. Anything that he drives, he has to register, make sure that the sheriff knows what car he would be driving. Okay. So, like, our sons are old enough to have their own cars, and we don't put their vehicles on there. So he just does not drive their cars ever. But our work vehicles, my vehicle has to be put on the sex offender registry too. So if I got pulled over by the police, they would see that I'm married to a person on the registry.
Wow. Are you required in Iowa to brand your travel documents, so your license or your license plate?
No.
No. Okay.
Well, thank God. No, they haven't done that yet, but it wouldn't surprise me if they start doing it. You just never know what kind of laws they're going to put in place that would affect your life.
So now, Nancy, what are you advocating for? Now you're an advocate, you're the Defenders Wife Club. What's your advocacy?
I am out to, first of all, I'm in defense mode of any legislation that would harm our family more and not keep anybody else safe in the meantime. But we would like to end the public sex offender registry here.
No, the public has access. Members of the public, and as it obtains in your neck of the woods, there's a police database, and then there's the one that the public can access. So is it like that across there?
Yes. In Iowa, there's most offenses that have a sex crime, a person is listed on the sex offense registry, and you can pull it up online and look at it and see who's living in your neighborhood.
Right.
You can look all over the state. You can see where there's 6,380 some people in Iowa that have a sex offense. They're on the sex offense registry.
So if you all have to move, you have to let the authorities know you're moving to another area, and the sex offense registry now will have the people where you move in that community. They could go to the sex offense registry and pull up and see who moved into the area.
Yes. So we actually are thinking about moving. So we've applied for my husband to get a special permission to be off the registry early. Not every state has that mechanism to do that. But in Iowa right now, you can ask the courts to give you a relief from that assignment. But it'll always be his criminal record.
Right.
So yeah, we want to move and have a fresh start somewhere, give our kids a fresh start.
To a different state or the same state?
No.
Same state.
I don't even, moving states after you've been on a registry is so confusing and difficult, and you really don't know what you're getting into. So I think we'll just stay in Iowa for now.
Understandable.
Each state has their own requirements, and each state has, and it's all convoluted. You can read through our registry requirements, and it can be so confusing. Right now I'm working with people with intellectual disabilities who have to register. And we have to train them on what the rules are. And sometimes we don't even understand what the rules are.
Yep.
But we have to keep them safe from being out of compliance with the rules. So, yeah, to move states is just overwhelming right now. I don't think we'll do that, but.
All right. Well, I see we have Amber online. Welcome, Amber. So we're going to take a break and then come back with Amber and hear her story. Thank you very much.
So we'll keep Nancy here.
Yes.
And of course, we'll hear Amber now is from Connecticut, and she will tell of her. Amber is a former Marine. Actually, her husband is a former Marine as well. And they have their experiences, and she's going to tell us about how it affected their family. And those of you who join us on Facebook or YouTube, thank you very much. I see some questions that, Beirut, there's a thing called nervous laughter. I don't think they're making fun of it. I wouldn't think so. I'm hoping
No,
that.
definitely not. She's the
Right?
one who's been through the experience, and clearly she's. I think that this we were just responding to a comment that was made on Facebook, Nancy. Someone was not pleased at the fact that you were laughing as you said some things, but I mean, this is life. People need to.
Oh yeah, let me address that.
Yeah.
No, none of this is funny.
Of course not.
Our laughter is a coping mechanism. And I could be sitting here crying.
Yeah.
There's nothing funny about what my husband did. There's nothing funny about the consequences of what our family has to go through.
Yeah.
There's absolutely nothing funny about what the children in the images that he viewed have been through. And I want to express my complete empathy for those children. I've been the victim of child sex abuse. I'm a survivor. So I don't ever want anybody to think that this is funny, but we have to recognize that this happens. Child sex abuse happens for so many reasons. It doesn't have to be a mental illness of pedophilia, but people commit sexual offenses because they're depressed and they don't know how to deal with things. I mean, there's lots and lots of different reasons why it happens. And I'm very sorry if I offended anyone by my laughter, because it's not funny. It's just once you've lived with this stigma for so long, that's how it comes out. And I apologize for hurting someone's feelings.
Understand. There are people here who understand us really too, as well. So let's go to that quick break quickly, and we'll come back with Amber. And Amber now will take us through her journey, having even had in experiencing sexual violence against herself while she was a Marine. Very interesting, and we welcome these women giving their testimonies this morning. Stay right there, folks. We'll be back.
Finally, Welcome Relief comes in the form of a scientific-based program that shows us how to manage through the tough, current challenges. Called Habitalism. It features best-selling author on positivity and happiness, Dr. Tal Ben-Shahar, integrated with the award-winning Intangence methodology of Ross. Visit habitalism.me to register now for this free life-transforming program endorsed by the United Nations established University for Peace. Gifted by Guardian Group. Live easy.
Morning. Listen now. Has noticed something out. There are new people in the bureau day. Where's that? Girl, the man is passing up and down in front of here with a set of woman.
I really noticed some woman living there, And they can't even say as much as good morning.
Well, listen now. I wonder if this human trafficking, you think is that?
So, how can you spot and identify perpetrators and victims of trafficking? Many victims are found living and working together in the same place and sleep in shared and inappropriate spaces. Victims work excessively long hours. They often sleep in the daytime and work long nights. They are often escorted everywhere they go and may appear to be malnourished. They may show signs of physical abuse, drug and alcohol use, and may also appear withdrawn, fearful, or intimidated. Victims who are migrants are often not in possession of their identity or immigration documents and have irregular immigration status. Perpetrators can be male or female and may appear to be managing or controlling the victims. And they may even at times appear to be the victim's best friend, boyfriend, or employer.
We are the counter-trafficking unit of the Ministry of National Security, Trinidad and Tobago, safeguarding human life.
Ion Dependency with Garth and Natasha.
Reality radio, at its best, where every life is a biography.
Sundays at 10 a.m. and exclusively on I-95.5 FM.
And streamed live on the Ion Dependency Facebook page and YouTube channel.
Thank you for staying with us. This is Ion Dependency, and this morning we are talking with Nancy and Amber, who is out in Connecticut, about their lives as a result of their husbands being placed on sex offense registries. So welcome, Amber, to the show. We want to start off by telling us about your life before your husband was arrested.
First, I want to thank you for having me here this morning, and I am glad to see Nancy here as well. These are really important topics. So, in terms of my life prior to our life being turned upside down by my husband being arrested, we were living a fairly, what people would call a normal life. We're both veterans. I am a veteran of the United States Marine Corps, and my husband is a Navy veteran. Early in my career as a United States Marine, I did encounter a sexual assault by another service member. So when we talk about this topic in terms of registries and sexual harm, we have to understand that this idea of a victim-offender dichotomy, that there are victims that are over here and there are perpetrators that are over here, and a lot of times these things don't overlap, is just not how humanity works. I understood very intimately what it was to be harmed. It affected me deeply in terms of my sense of safety about the world. Being in a military unit, your expectation is that everyone's working together. You're here to support one another. And so when this happened to me, it was very devastating. And the other thing was kind of the culture around when things like this happen. It was, are you sure you remembered it correctly when I reported it to my platoon sergeant? Did you remember this correctly? Are you sure this is something that you want to talk about? This will tear the unit apart. This will affect your career. Are you sure you didn't invite it? All of those things kind of came into play, because when we talk about these issues, it becomes about power. It really is about power, and it's about very intimate relationships and the interaction between individuals. And so, that was kind of my first interaction with the idea that the world was not as safe as I had thought it was prior to this happening to me. So you fast forward many years, about 20 years. I am married. I have 4 children of ranging ages. At the time, they were ranging from age 5 all the way up to age 21.
Amber?
And yes.
Yes, sorry. Before you, just to close that door, because we have 1 or 2 soldiers listening here too, right? So, but nothing came of that that assault. You ended up retiring or resigning?
Right. So what happened was, in terms of the assault that I experienced, was like I said, I initially went to my supervisor. And, I say supervisor because I talked to a lot of civilians, but I went to my platoon sergeant, and I said, this is what happened. And at that point, I gave you kind of what the reaction was. And what really stuck with me at the time when I spoke with him was, this will affect your career. This will essentially end your career. You will be painted in a certain way. And so at that time, I had the option of trying to take it further. I had the option of trying to go to civilian authorities, and I chose to do none of that. You know, I can look back on it and say I should have done this, that, or the other. At the time, I was 18 years old and devastated, and I felt like I was on trial in terms of the way I was being treated. So what happened was I did not pursue it further. My coping mechanism was to kind of isolate myself. I you know, found myself avoiding the person who had perpetrated the harm against me. I found myself not being as outgoing as I used to be. I found myself coping in other ways with partying and other things. And what happened was I got painted at that time because of the rumor mill as something that I was not, to the point that when I was transferred to another duty station, they actually called ahead and said, watch out, this is a troublemaker. So in the same way that I wanted it to not affect my career, it did follow to my next duty station, where I experienced extreme discrimination because of it. When I first reported to my duty station, I didn't even know a single soul. And they actually said, well, you know, you're the only female Marine that has come to this duty station in quite some time. And for that reason, you can't associate with any of the male Marines, which there were no other female Marines that were not of higher rank. So here I am. I can't associate with anyone. They confined me to my barracks room, and I had done nothing. So that's a lot of trauma, actually, that, to be honest with you, I haven't talked about in a long time.
Right. No, because you see, the reason why I asked that question, because you're an advocate now, and to think that what you went through, you would be really an advocate for the sex offense registry. So this is why I wanted people to hear.
Yes.
You know, even though you've experienced that, you still have a different take on this registry. So let's fast forward now. You got married, you and your husband got married.
Just real quickly before we fast forward, I'm so sorry.
Sure, go ahead.
I thought that the sex offense registry was rational. I thought that it was here to protect us. So you're exactly right. When you experience harm, you are caught up in your own pain. You are caught up in wanting to feel safe. And so now we can kind of fast forward, and I'll tell you why that sense of false security, or that sense of safety that the registry provides, is actually a disservice to people who've been victimized. So fast forwarding to the time that my husband is accused of a sex offense. So my husband was a teacher. He was a very well-respected teacher, and he found himself in the position where there was an accusation that he was having an inappropriate relationship with a student who was 16 years old at the time.
Want your teachers to listen now?
What's that?
No. I'm just saying to our teachers now. You know, go ahead, Amber.
Yes, and so this is what happened. To be clear, the allegation was not, that it was a violent situation. It was not. The allegation was that he was having a relationship, sexual relationship with this student.
How old was she?
She was 16 years old.
Right.
And in the United States, particularly at that time, and even now today, there are a lot of challenges with due process when somebody makes an accusation against someone else. So we found ourselves in a situation where my husband chose to take a plea deal through the criminal justice process, and he was convicted of what we refer to in the United States as statutory rape. In the state of New York, they call it, they just call it rape. They don't call it statutory rape. And that it just so that people understand what that means. It's the fact that it is not considered that an individual can consent to sexual activity by virtue of their age. In the United States, the age of consent, it varies depending on the state you're in. Some places it's 16, 17, 18. It varies depending on where you are. So that's what happened. I could probably get into a whole nother show about the criminal legal system and due process and the fairness.
Yes.
But I will not do that because that's not what this show is about. But what I'm here to tell you about is kind of what happens after that.
Yep.
In terms of public registries, particularly because this is something that is being considered.
But before you do, tell us what your husband, how many years did he get? Did he serve time? Yeah. And was he told, at what point was he told that he would have to, his name would go on the
was he
registry?
arrested at home or at school? How did that go?
Happen?
So what happened was he was actually arrested at the time that this was happening and allegations were made. He actually attempted to take his own life. And this is not usually a part of the story that I tell, but I'm going to tell this part of the story. He was then admitted to a psychiatric hospital because of the suicide attempt. And he was arrested from there after 2 weeks of receiving services. Well, receiving whatever they call services.
So the police came to his home, or he was arrested?
No, they came to the police came and arrested him from the hospital.
Yeah, no, I understand, but sorry,
Yeah.
what I meant was, why did he decide? Because he would have gotten wind that the police were coming for him, that he decided to commit suicide, or how did he break this news to you, or what? How did that happen?
So how I was at a conference for my job, and someone came to where I was sitting. I was listening to some speakers and things like that, and said, it was actually my HR person, so human resources person, came out and said, you need to come. Someone who you love very much is in need of you right now. So it was the call from the hospital that this had happened. At that time, I had no idea what the trigger for this was or anything like that. I raced back. I was unable to, they did not let me go in to see him because at that point they had admitted him. And so then I get a call from the authorities, which I have no idea what it's about, saying, we would like you to come to the police station because we need to ask you some questions. I had no interaction with the criminal legal system at that time. And what I should have done was immediately called a lawyer. But what I did was I walked into the police station and I had a chat with them because they wanted to see what I knew. They were basically interrogating me like I was a criminal. So that's what happened there. And then at 2 o'clock in the morning, after I'm just trying to, I'm devastated at this. I'm like, I don't know what's happening. I'm trying to make sure that my children are okay. I go home at 2 o'clock in the morning. The police come to my house, knock on the door. There's probably 8 to 10 police on the porch. And they are there to conduct a search. And they come and they take my husband's computer and they take his vehicle and they take some other things. And I'm just like, okay, what's going on? 2 weeks later, they go to arrest him where he is. And then he's incarcerated for about a year. And then he is required to register for life, and he is currently serving a period of 10 years of probation.
He has
So
to register for life. So he's
he
on
has
that
to
list
register for life, yes. And that is just in the state of New York, which is where this occurred, you have a tiered system. So this tiered system is determined by a risk assessment tool that is not a clinical tool. It was developed by law enforcement and judges and things like that. It's not validated. And it puts you in a risk level 1, 2, or 3. So if you're risk level 1, then you are required to register for 20 years. 2 and 3 are required to register for life. Even though we live in Connecticut, he's required to register based on the state of conviction because that's what Connecticut law says. So had this occurred in Connecticut, he would have been on the registry for 10 years. But it's complicated when you go between states.
If you're just joining us, you're listening to Dependency, and we are speaking with Nancy and Amber, who are giving their different stories of their husbands being arrested for sex offense, and now they're on the sex offense registry. And Amber is taking us through her experience. Now, Amber, they found out, and this is not to put any shadow on the victim, but you know, she went bragging to her friends, and I guess that's how the authorities found out about it. Is that correct?
So it's my understanding, and just to be clear, there was never a trial, and no one in law enforcement ever asked my husband what happened or anything like that. So I can only tell you what my understanding is, and you can take it for what it is. My understanding is that the individual that made the accusation shared with friends that this was going on, making that assertion. Another student heard this at a party and then reported it to the school, who then reported it to the authorities.
Good. So how does it affect your family now? Since that happened, tell us, what can we expect? Because as I said, our lawmakers are thinking of setting up one here. We already have a police database, but we are looking at a public database now. So take us through your journey with this.
So the first thing I want to say that is the most damaging thing about someone being on a public registry is it does not only affect that person, but it affects every person who is associated with them. So when we think about public registries and what they're designed to do, the idea or the concept seems logical, right? Okay, so this person committed X, Y, or Z. Therefore, we need to know that that happened. So as parents and citizens and other people living in the community, we can avoid them or keep ourselves safe from this dangerous person. The problem with that is that 95% of people who are on public registries never reoffend. And it really is focusing our thoughts and our resources on the wrong, the wrong problem. It tells us that it's a stranger or someone who's already committed an offense hiding in the bushes, ready to jump out and attack our children. And that's just not what the social science tells us. What the social science tells us is it's individuals that are in close social proximity to us. So it's our our fathers, our uncles, our individuals in the family, and women do commit sexual offenses as well. So we're looking at the problem in a completely wrong way. So when somebody's family essentially is placed on the registry because their address is on the registry, the car that they drive is on the registry, all of that is public data. you then have anyone in that household that is kind of attached to that stigma. So I mentioned that we have 4 children. I've had situations where my children have been ridiculed. I have had situations where my husband cannot pick up my child from school because that's something that he's restricted from doing. So my other children who are older have had to step in to go into the school, which then stigmatizes them, go into the school to get their younger sibling and bring the child out to pass along to their father who can't go into the school. And all of this is in a very public fashion. I have had charities that have said, I'm sorry, your money is no good here because your address is on the registry. So it really ripples out to the entire family and attaches a stigma that causes more harm than it does in terms of keeping individuals safe.
I agree. I actually was privy to some information, some statistics from our local children's authority, which addresses directly what you said about persons who commit these types of offenses. In our case in Trinidad and Tobago, largely mothers, fathers, stepfathers, and other relatives. So that of course, those close family ties prevents people from reporting offenses. And even while they are those that are reported and the persons are convicted, as you say, that it's unlikely that persons who are convicted of a sexual offense are going to reoffend. And I think that aspect of the sexual crimes in Trinidad and Tobago has not been looked at. And as you said earlier too, it really speaks to how the criminal justice system, and I know that you use the term criminal legal system because there's no justice in there, how that system really is adversarial in nature and punitive in nature and does not seek to heal and restore neither the victim nor the offender to move on with their lives once the legal process is concluded.
No, I'm sure that statement could be challenged, Natasha, but in this case here,
Which one?
They're not doing anything to restore the victim or the perpetrator's lives. I'm actually sure somebody will challenge that. You say that, you know that. But Amber, how did it affect directly your family? Know that your husband is an offense is a registered person. How did it affect your family?
So, I mean, when you look at my particular family and the different, like, again, we have children of all ages. So I could give you examples in terms of, what I find myself doing as the spouse is it's a little bit harder for me to meet new people, operate in social situations, because I'm always thinking, do people know our situation? Because it's out there. So it's not like you have a big letter on your head, right? But in this day and age, all it takes is, a simple Google search, and this is coming up, and this is a stigma that's attached to you. I'll give you an example. My 16-year-old daughter is of the age where she is making friends and even having romantic relationships, and all of those kind of things. So she recently broke up with her boyfriend, who it took some time to talk to the parents so that they would understand, what our family was going through, having them understand it. They were very understanding. So we had kind of gone through that whole process and she felt safe with that individual. But just like 16-year-olds are, you know, it's 16-year-old relationship. It's not going to last forever. So now she's finding herself in a state of, do I try to date other people? Because I'm going to have to go through this whole process again, where I'm talking to them about what happened to my family. I have to answer all of their questions about, you know, is my father safe to be around? Because, you know, he's been deemed dangerous by the state. Going through the process where my parents have to talk to his parents about that. And am I going to be rejected? Not because of who I am, but because of this stigma that's attached to my family.
So is
So
is
that's
it
one
requ-
example.
so sorry, if you just joined us, first we are speaking with Nancy and Amber. They both joined us via video, and they're telling us their experiences with their husband now as on the sex offense registry. Now, Amber, so is it by law that once your children get into a relationship, or you think it's just the moral thing to do to tell them about their father, or is that the law as well?
So it's not the law, but it's the right thing to do, right?
Right, okay.
So, you know, I take the approach in terms of disclosing these things to other parents that my children come in contact with, because I believe that it's important for us to be open, honest, compliant, and it is up to other parents to decide, you know, if they feel comfortable. And I don't do that because I think that my husband is a danger. I do that because I think that it's the right thing to do. And what you don't want to have is somebody else controlling your narrative, right? So I don't have the luxury of controlling the narrative if somebody goes on the internet and reads whatever they want to read, because the government has placed my husband on a public registry. So that's why I follow that, because it's very damaging to a child who is trying to be in a friendship or trying to interact with anybody in the world, for the narrative that is out there on the internet to come before their own version of it. So that's why we do that. We don't have the luxury of not, because the alternative is worse.
Well, a related question, Amber and Nancy, you can jump in on this as well. How has this experience impacted on the relationship that your husband has with his children?
Amber, you could.
So I will say my children know their father, and so they don't have a negative view of him in terms of they feel that, you know, he's dangerous or that he's not redeemable or anything like that. But what I will say is children have, when they're so deep affected by the different things that happen, they don't have a full capability to understand why this is happening. And so, for instance, when my 9-year-old, you know, his father can't take him to the park, he doesn't have a full understanding of why that's happening to him. And that resentment can grow towards his father as opposed to towards a system that is causing this to happen. So there's that. There's also a certain level in terms of the spouse where I call it running interference. I find myself trying to understand what's going on with my husband because he's experiencing a certain level of oppression because of the registry, but also trying to understand what's going on with my children because they are also experiencing damage from the situation, and trying to balance that in the middle. And it can be very difficult.
Okay, folks.
I feel like we always have our guard up. We always have to be aware of who's looking at our social media pages and judging us, who is driving by our house and wondering I've had people attack my husband on social media and our local pages, and I can't control that.
Yeah.
I have an example of not telling someone. Several years ago, we had a new neighbor move into the neighborhood, and they had a boy that was about my boys' age, and he would come over here, and my husband was still on supervision at the time, so he couldn't be here when my husband was here. And he didn't understand that. He was like 10 years old, and he would just drop by, and I'd say, nope, you can't play today because, if you see this car in the driveway, my husband's car, I said, you can't come.
Wow.
And so he would, and I kept thinking, gosh, I really need to go over and talk to his parents and tell them before they find out from someone else.
Yeah.
And I never got around to doing that because it's a busy life, and it's not a conversation that you look forward to having. It's,
of course.
You
Yes,
never know
and-
how somebody's going to react. So
Yes.
I didn't tell them. And then it ended up that they did find out, and I was confronted by text saying, what's the story with your husband? And it was I was at school, I was at college, and it just caught me off guard. I had to backpedal and say, I'm not trying to cover up what he did. I meant to tell you. And that little guy quit coming over to our house. And they didn't really play together after that.
So now your children are deprived of a friend, and so is he because of.
Yeah.
Well, we have several lessons to learn here from this, but Amber, let's come back to you and somebody who saw. Natasha shared Untouchable is the name of it, right?
Yeah.
The movie,
A documentary.
the
yes.
documentary, and they
Some
pull
of our
out some.
audience
Some of our audience watched it, and what Pearl is saying here, that she saw that it could lead an individual to becoming jobless, homeless, even a street dweller. And he also went on to say that children need to be protected from sex offenders. But the part about jobless, homeless, and walk us through that, because I'm thinking our government here may have to set up a separate housing settlement for people on the sex offense registry alone. How does that obtain, and what experience did you all have with that?
So there are a lot of different things when you're talking about somebody's ability to reintegrate into the community, whether they're, convicted of a sexual offense or any type of offense, right? As you know.
Yes.
So when somebody is trying to put their life back together after serving their time or going through the system, the best thing that you can do is have them building a life that is a life that they don't want to see upended by doing harm, right? So when somebody is on a public registry, it's very difficult for employers to see past that. And even the most compassionate people who are employers that might say, you know what, I want to give this person a chance. I can see past, I see that they've done the hard work. I see that they've served their time. They're trying to put their life back together. Their business is put in jeopardy because someone may find this person on a public registry and say, why are you employing that person? You're putting other people at risk. Because not really knowing the details of the situation or knowing the statistics or knowing, whether there is in fact a risk, that's the nature of humanity, that you're going to say, okay, I don't want to be around this person. This is a dangerous thing in the workplace. So employers are very, very hesitant to give a lot of people with criminal records, but particularly people who are appearing on a public registry for a sexual offense a chance. So, what you find is even if people are able to get a job, they're severely underemployed, and they're often exploited because it's like, okay, well, what else are you going to do? You have to do this type of job that, you may have a PhD. I know a lot of people who have very, very high levels of education that are mopping floors. And so, I hear the people that say, well, who
They
cares
should have
about
thought of
them?
that.
They
They should
should
have
be
thought of
mopping
that.
the floor.
Yeah.
I hear that. However, again, when you talk about breaking cycles of sexual harm, you want people to be building a life that they're proud of, and you want people to be empowered to do better, because when you know better, you do better. And having them underemployed, exploited, or even not able to meet their economic needs at all is just perpetuating cycles of brokenness.
Yes.
And then when you talk about, obviously if somebody can't get a job, they can't pay for housing. And not only can they not pay for housing, even if they could, they're often discriminated against because they're seen as what the government is calling them, a danger to society.
A predator.
So it's just a cycle that just keeps going on and on. And the thing is that people are like, well, we don't have to care about these individuals. We don't need to hold them in humanity anymore because of what they did. But, if we just get them away from us, there is no away, there is only somewhere else. And somebody has to take care of the somewhere else.
Yeah.
So you're right. In the United States, there are a certain amount of places that are specifically for those who are required to register, but they're not run by the government. They're run by compassionate individuals or nonprofit organizations, and they often can't get funding. They often are, broken down by the community because people don't want that in their backyard. So it's not a solution to have those things going on. And you're actually creating desperation and scarcity, which are the conditions that originally caused people to commit offenses in the first place.
Right. And
So
to them committing other offenses in order to survive.
right. So even if it's not a sexual offense, it's, robbery or, just trying to, food, trespassing because they have nowhere else to go, all sorts of things that people normally wouldn't do if they're not placed in a place of desperation.
Yep.
Someone said they saw the guy. He was forced to live in his car. He had to keep moving. No bathroom facilities, no place to do basic functions. He was totally robbed of everything just for that offense. And mind you, people, there are people who would have confessed to lying about someone making an inappropriate sexual gesture to them or act to them. Remember, there are people who as well are falsely accused of sexual offenses. Suppose they end up on the registry. So, somebody has a good job, good family, and there was an example of a young lady sleeping with a stepfather. And when the mother found out, she turned the story around and flipped it around and said, look, he threatened to kill her. And, that's why she was scared to say anything. Now he will end up on a sex offense registry.
If convicted.
And once convicted, he now has to. What you're saying here basically is that someone ending up on a sex offense registry can end up homeless and become a vagrant because if they have to go rent an apartment, is it required for them to tell the landlord that they're on the offense registry as well, Nancy?
I'm sorry, what?
Or I don't answer you because we coming close to quarter to the hour, so
yeah,
we want to get your ideas of what. But what I'm saying is that if the person who is on the sex offense registry, if they have to go rent an apartment, do they have to inform the landlord as well, or landlady?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, to rent an apartment, they do a criminal background check on any. I don't know of any place that wouldn't do a criminal background check and that would show up. So you're better off just confessing it at the beginning when you move in and letting them know that they're going to find you on the sex offense registry. And then some of those places can be very exploitive too. They'll let you live there, but they'll jack your rent up. We have trailer parks here in our area that the homes are extremely dilapidated, and the owner of those trailers will rent to a certain population in Iowa that can't live within 2,000 feet of a school or a daycare or anything. So that's the kind of living conditions that they're forced to live in can be hazardous. They're often filled with other types of crime currently going on. Drug dealing, prostitution is illegal here in Iowa, so they get that in their neighborhoods, and it's not very safe.
So I do want to mention, because you mentioned kind of the residency restrictions, which again, the social science shows us does not reduce the incidence of sexual offending. But I just want people to kind of like mull this over in their brain. You may have a situation where you cannot live within, 2,000 feet of a school. That doesn't mean that you can't live within 2,000 feet of a child. So you may be living in a housing project full of children, right? But it's not next to the school, so it's fine. But again, that's the proximity, the physical proximity is not what causes people to offend. It's the social proximity, it's the brokenness, it's the power dynamics.
So Amber, what are you recommending? Let's say our lawmakers are listening, the people who wanted to, what advice, what can you recommend?
So what I recommend is that there should never in any shape or form be a public registry. Because
that means the registry that the public would have access to. That is what you're saying. Right, go ahead.
Correct. And in terms of even a law enforcement registry, law enforcement has this information. You do not need an additional registry. So let's just, again, try to really dig deep down, okay? That would mean that we are not looking at the science and saying, if you've committed a sexual offense, you are more likely to commit another sexual offense, which is not what the science tells us. So even a law enforcement registry actually is putting individuals at risk. It's diverting resources and attention to people that are not likely to reoffend. Meanwhile, it is siphoning resources from things that will work. So what works? That's the big question. What works? What works is prevention, education, educating children and other individuals on what good touch, bad touch is, on what it means to interact in terms of what consent is. Those are the things. And then when harm occurs, what I suggest is community-based interventions that hold everybody in community. I'm a big proponent of restorative justice. Restorative justice asks a whole different set of questions. So an adversarial criminalizing system says, okay, who broke the law? How can we punish them? How long are we going to punish them? And it immediately separates the party and does not allow for either accountability or repair to happen. In restorative justice, it brings people together and it asks the right questions. Who committed the harm? Who is required to do something to try to repair it? What does the person who's been harmed need, right? What services do they need? Do they need therapy? Do they need financial means to repair their lives? Like, what are the things that they need? And it also, again, holds space for them in their humanity. So it's not, justice is not decimating the person that caused harm. Justice is repairing the person who's been harmed and making sure that it never happens again, because you're also repairing the person who's harmed and you're looking at the system and the community as to why are these things occurring. Is it because we have mixed messages and we don't talk about sexual interactions, and we don't treat our emerging adults as sexual beings, right? So we don't talk to them. Like we put it under the rug. We're like, oh, let's not talk about that. That's taboo. Meanwhile, we should be talking to them about what harm looks like and how you disclose it and how you repair it and how you prevent it.
So you're
That's
proponent
what we should be
for
putting
sexual,
money.
so sexual education in schools, what you think should be a part of the curriculum as well.
So whether it's in schools, whether it's in the community, it's incumbent upon all of us. So schools, churches, parents, you know, everybody needs to, just like we teach our kids about math and reading, what is a large part of the human experience? We're sexual beings. We will have relationships. We will have intimate relationships. If we're not teaching people about what healthy sexual relationships look like, then they don't have the tools that they need to operate in the world, just as much as if we didn't teach them math.
Absolutely. I'm just
Nancy?
nodding my head off as you're talking there, Amber. But as we wrap up, Nancy, what would your suggestions be to lawmakers here in TNT about this proposed registry or public registry?
I echo everything Amber said. She just puts things so eloquently and intelligently and rationally. That's what needs to happen is education. We need to provide a safe place for somebody to seek help if they're having feelings that are disturbing. Yeah. I think a lot of times the misunderstanding is that people who commit sexual harm really like what they're doing. And sometimes they don't understand what they're doing. They don't understand why they're having feelings, why they're acting out this way. And so if we could make a safe place for them to go and find help. And even I've heard of countries who have billboards up that say, if you're looking at child pornography on the internet, here's a number you can call to seek help. And, that's not right. But instead we just stigmatize it and we call people names. We call people horrible names. And that shame is never a good vehicle for rehabilitation.
No,
Yeah.
this is where we asked our guests to put on their Nike sneakers and answer a question in like 30 seconds. So let's start with Amber. Amber, people listening, they might say you're crazy. You still with a husband? Some people thought he dead. Why are you still with someone who committed offense or is accused of? Why did you decide to stay and keep him as your husband?
So there are a couple of different reasons. Number one is I know my husband. I also learned a lot about the criminal legal system in the United States and what that looks like and how it does not seek truth. But more importantly, I've been trying to keep my family together because we have 4 children. I love my husband. I know him. I know that he's redeemable. The second thing is, as someone who has experienced harm, and the more that I have experienced this, we're using the wrong solutions.
Yep.
We're doing things that will actually perpetuate cycles of violence.
Yes.
So if we do not redeem and rehabilitate people and we continue to focus on the wrong solutions, there will be more people like myself that experience harm again and again, and we need to stop it. And
Nancy,
that's
why did you stay with your bloke?
I have to echo Amber again. I've known my husband since I was 13 years old. He always respected me then. I know he's a respectful person. I knew his mother. His mother didn't raise a monster. I've seen all of his psychological testing. I know all of his deepest secrets. So if I don't know yours, Garth and Natasha, I don't know what your psychosexual exam would say.
Right.
How do I know that you're not somebody? So I know who he is. He's much more than the mistakes that he made. Aren't we all?
Yes.
Yes. I mean,
Absolutely.
Natasha got married to me, didn't she? So, and I mean, I had my past, and she was gracious enough to understand that and let me into her life. So, I'm an advocate for getting a second opportunity to turn their life around, but you can't do it if once your name. Oh, quickly, Amber. So in your neck of the woods, is your passport and ID card and all of these things now will be stamped as someone who is on the sex offense registry?
Yes. So anyone who is convicted in the United States of an offense against a child, regardless of whether you were a child, regardless of the circumstances, I know an individual who is on the registry for not reporting what was seen as an inappropriate relationship, and she was the grandmother of somebody who was having a relationship with an older woman, and she's on a registry. All of those people have a stamp on their passport.
Wow.
That tells anybody anywhere in the world that they are a child sexual offender, which means different things in different parts of the world and is very harmful.
Yeah,
Yes.
of course.
Well, ladies, this is just part one of this discussion. We still have more work to do with you guys.
Yes.
You still have a lot to share with us. But this morning, we want to thank you all very much for spending the time with us and educating our public. I'm sure we're going to learn a lot in the future. So we thank you once again. Please let us keep in touch this week. So we'll plan part 2 of this program.
Yep.
And God bless you all. Stay strong. Keep the advocacy going. We understand what it means. All right.
Thank you very much
for the opportunity.
You're doing great work.
Okay, Nancy and Amber.
Thank you. We'll be in touch.
Yes.
We'll be in touch. Take care. Bye-bye.
See you.
All right, folks, there you have it. So you heard the information this morning. And for those of you who are thinking, I'm hoping that somebody who is of like mind would have been moved by what you heard this morning, because our lawmakers are about to put something like this in place.
Yep.
So you end up on this.
We cannot continue to be putting harm upon harm and upon harm. And if we are wise to what has happened over the last 30 years in the US and the experiences that have come out of that, we would be well advised to learn from that.
Yes.
And try to come up with better solutions.
So you know the saying, if you save one life, you make 1,000 angels sing. So
Indeed.
those who've been listening this morning, if you're downloading child pornography or you're looking at it, or you have your eye on your little daughter or that is a niece of yours,
Get some help.
go get some help, because you could end up on a registry, and it can.
Or not even on a registry, you could end up in prison. So before that happens to you and your family, get help.
And you know how they treat with these issues in prison as well.
There you go.
So folks, that's it for us this morning. Thank you very much for your time. Mr. Daily Knock is up next with the 12 o'clock major news.
Yes. Good
Have a good
afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thanks, Cameron.
Eye on Dependency with Garth and Natasha.